Morning, guys. Welcome to this Friday's Trending. Just myself today, but as per usual, the show is brought to you with association with Iconic Coffee. Head over to shop.iconic.com and use the code TRENDING for 10% off. Well, we have a new Pope. None of us seem to know much about him, so I'll head over to that story towards the end. But let's start with this strange coincidence that a lot of Epstein's information is supposedly coming out. We have Pam Bondi, the Scientology funded member of Donald Trump's cabinet there, talking about the fact that they're looking through hundreds or thousands of videos of Epstein, just Epstein alone, abusing young children, why he would keep the video content of himself and not anyone else. That comes as some sort of surprise. Why would you keep your own criminal conduct there but get rid of everybody else's? Seems bizarre to me, maybe kicking the can down the road. But don't worry, Kash Patel is on the case. Kash Patel, FBI Director Kash Patel, claims Jeffrey Epstein did, in fact, hang himself in prison, while also revealing he's working on a plan to release the full Epstein files. Again, kicking the can down the road. I don't know if there's many of us actually believe that Epstein killed himself or is indeed even dead. There's so much more going on here, including the transhumanist agenda and everything that's part of that. What's going on under the island? What's going on under Zorro Ranch? What's going on the surrounding islands like St. Bart's, where P. Diddy was hanging about as well, and many others that are involved. I think there's a guy from Abercrombie and Fitch there. He's also involved in what seems to be some sort of sex trafficking ring, although he's not been convicted yet. But then again, I think he's got later stage Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, and they don't know if they can trial him anyway. So there's a lot more going on here than just Jeffrey Epstein. So far we've got Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself, according to Kash Patel, and he was killed in prison. Sorry, he did kill himself, according to Kash Patel. Hung himself in prison with his bed sheets. And Pam Bondi thinks that the only person being abused or doing the abuse was actually Jeffrey Epstein himself. So none of that sounds true to me. Just throwing out there my personal opinion. So Kash Patel says the release is coming in the near future, kicking the can down the road, and that the plan has been carefully built to protect the victims involved. Hundreds of thousands, apparently, not Virginia Giuffre and the other victims that have since taken their own lives, allegedly, since all this information's come out. Obviously, we had O'Keefe the other day, James O'Keefe, putting out the information. There was a former worker and friend, an employee of Prince Andrew, saying that Prince Andrew did indeed abuse young girls. We knew all this stuff. This has been through the courts already. So this is nothing new. This is just churning out information that's either just leads to nothing or is nonsensical. This guy apparently was the security for Prince Andrew, but didn't know he was being filmed by O'Keefe. It seems to be a bit hammered at the time, trying to impress some young lady that you don't see is off screen. So none of this makes any sense at all. They're raking over old ground, not coming up with new information at all. We've got people like Juliet Brighton, who I speak to on regular occasions, quite livid about how this information is being used and how they're kicking the can down the road. No one wants to talk about the transhumanist angle and what might be going on the surrounding islands of Little St. James, so St. Bart's, St. Thomas, and other islands around there, the Virgin Islands, that sort of Caribbean way, and also what's going on under New Mexico, Zorro Ranch. Scientology have their Trementina base there, which is, I think, around about 2 hours away from Zorro Ranch with a commercial flight. So it's a big place, New Mexico. What's going on underneath there? A lot more to this. But Kash Patel says it's all right because Jeffrey Epstein did, in fact, hang himself. We have a little clip here.
Person with a brain and a beating heart.
Yes, sir.
Did Jeffrey Epstein hang himself or did somebody kill him?
Senator, I believe he hung himself in a cell in the Metropolitan Detention Center.
Are you going to release all the information about that?
Senator, we are working through that right now with the Department of Justice.
When you think you'll have it done, Kash?
I think in the near future, sir.
Like before I die?
Senator, we've been working on that, and we're doing it in a way that protects victims and also doesn't put out into the ether information that is irrelevant for production of the public, such as CSAM.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So he says they have to make sure the public doesn't receive harmful or irrelevant contact such as a child's abuse material. Again, people know that Jeffrey Epstein wasn't the only one. So which one is it? Was he trafficking young girls to other people? And there doesn't seem to be anybody he's trafficking to. Or is he using them just for himself and filming himself? And people like Juliet Bryant and other victims say that they didn't really see anybody, young women being trafficked to other than close associates, other people off in the distance in this large circle. It seemed to be for his own use. So there's a clash of information there, a cash clash, and doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense at all. So he seems very shifty when you ask him a few questions. I know he's got the eye thing going on. But who really believes that Jeffrey Epstein hung himself at the moment? Who really believes that? I don't think many of us do. A lot of questions over Virginia Giuffre's death recently as well, and the fact that she was in some sort of strange car crash with a bus a week or so before, saying that she only had days to live. None of it really makes any sense at all. So keep an eye on this one, but that's not true, in my opinion. And there's a lot more to know here. And I doubt we'll be knowing any more from the likes of Pam Bondi or Kash Patel in the near future. Things are still kicking off in the US. Identity of a second man illegally deported to El Salvador prison revealed. Daniel Lozano Camargo, 20, was deported in March in violation of legal settlement over his asylum application. It's fine when Israel do it, though. Just build small conclaves and cities and towns where they shouldn't be. But no, this guy, he's the problem. The identity of a second man illegally deported from the US by the Trump administration in defiance of a court order and now in detention in El Salvador has been revealed. Daniel Lozano Camargo, a 20-year-old Venezuelan, was deported to El Salvador's notorious CECOT terrorism confinement facility in March under the White House invocation of the Alien Enemies Act. His deportation came after authorities declared him, along with about 240 other men, to be members of the Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan gang that the US government has defined as a terrorist organization. I don't know what information or proof they have of this at all. I think it's something to do with a tattoo on someone's knuckles that didn't really seem to say what Donald Trump was claiming it said. And there's people saying that it's been photoshopped and all of these things and that it wasn't there when he was actually in jail. So read more into that because there's a lot more going on there, as there always is. Do your own research, come to your own conclusions. Lozano Camargo's family members deny that he has gang affiliations. He's a 20-year-old. Politico revealed Lozano Camargo's identity after a Maryland judge last month ruled that the Trump administration had improperly removed him in violation of a 2024 legal settlement that forbade immigration authorities from deporting him while his application for asylum was pending. Again, so we see what's going on and what Trump's supporting over in the Middle East there, and it might not seem relevant, but how can you support illegal settlements in one part of the world and deport young men that you have very little or no evidence of in another part of the world? It's all absurd. We know Donald Trump is widely connected to this cult, this Chabad cult, as are Putin and Netanyahu that we talk about all the time. There's much more going on here. The pieces of the chessboard are being moved around. But this young man now is in one of the most horrible, notorious prisons with very little evidence that I can tell of that he's actually part of this gang. The judge, Stephanie Gallagher, who was appointed to the bench by Trump, ordered officials to facilitate Lozano Camargo's return to the US. So far, the administration over there, hard for you to say, has not compiled or complied. He is reported to have entered the US in 2022 as an asylum seeker, initially spending time in a facility for underage migrants until he was 18, so it was only 2 years ago. According to Politico, he was subsequently twice arrested for possession of cocaine, most recently last November, and was sentenced in January to 120 days in prison. So he spent a lot of that in prison. He's got record here of drug smuggling. It was from there that he was transferred to the custody of the Immigration, Customs and Enforcement Authority, ICE, which filed an application for his detention, claiming he was in the country illegally. In her ruling, Gallagher agreed with immigration rights advocates that Lozano Camargo should not have been deported until his asylum application was resolved, while withholding his identity by referring to him only as pseudonym Christian, she said, as he was fleeing danger and threats in Venezuela. So it's hard to know what's going on there. Clearly, there's a lot of chess moves moving around, but Trump is basically saying, overriding the laws in which he should be withholding, and the Constitution, like the freedom of speech and everything that he's claiming to stand up for, he's actually overriding and pulling down. Doge was part of that. Clearly, they were pulling down and getting rid of elements within the government and within the CIA and these other institutions that were going to block them doing what they want to do. It was quite clear from the outside looking in that that was the case. The structure of this, Rome, which is the West, is falling. It's been taken apart from within, which is what Sabbaty and Frankists do. And it's my opinion, and many others that do this research, at the likes of Donald Trump, are Sabbaty and Frankists at their core, and sabotaging comes from there. But don't worry, more Trump. He's got people in power and in places that are going to sort it out. So they've got rid of Jesuit Fauci that was in the background, and apparently he was to blame for warp speed, and he was the one whispering in Trump's ear, although Trump's meant to be all powerful, and he's the one in control. So Jesuit Trump, he is Jesuit educated, Donald Trump. So Jesuit Fauci in the background talking to Jesuit educated Trump, who went to Jesuit University but didn't pass his qualifications, but that's not why they're there anyway. So Fauci is the bad one. He's off to the side. They got a new fella in, but don't worry. He's very well known and has a background with Peter Thiel of Palantir, the transhumanist technocrat that we all know controls and funds the likes of Elon Musk and many other people. So Peter Thiel knows this guy well. There is a clip here. So have a look at this clip here. Peter Thiel explaining that he has a background with this fella whose name is Dr. J. Bhattacharya.
Can be done what must be done. Maybe there's sort of many anecdotes one can start with, but I thought I'd start with one that involves a good friend of mine from undergraduate days at Stanford, Jay Bhattacharya. He sort of ended up pursuing sort of center-right, vaguely libertarian, ended up pursuing an academic career, got a PhD in econ, medical degree, eventually became a tenured prof at Stanford in health policy, and spent decades plugging away, writing various papers and books on what didn't work about socialist medicine of one sort or another, and then
So there you have it. He's connected to Peter Thiel already, so they've got their men in there. Got rid of Fauci, although Fauci was on side anyway, but they needed a full guy. President-elect Donald Trump has revealed his pick to lead the National Institute of Health. This is back last year. The guy is actually in power now. He wasn't back then. On the 1st of April, he was sworn in. So he's president of the NIH, completing the roster of appointments that will be charged with fulfilling his Make America Healthy Again drive. Now, we had RFK Jr.'s fantastic book and exposure of Fauci and all the crimes and everything he's been doing over the years, and you can agree with that, of course, but there's a bigger picture on there here. I mean, we know that RFK Jr. is surrounded by these bad guys as well, so what do they have on him? On him, he flew on Epstein's plane a couple of times, don't they all? So rounding out his public health related picks, Trump also nominated Jim O'Neill as Deputy Secretary of Health and Community Services Department, reporting to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. All of these same Kabbalistic Chabad guys seem to be getting in there. And then you have the transhumanist element, which is Peter Thiel, and he knows this guy back as an undergraduate. What are the chances? The selection of Bhattacharya is entirely in keeping with the president-elect's decision to appoint candidates for his health team who have a history of challenging conventional wisdom. That means it's chaos. They are creating more chaos to create the new order from that chaos. That's how it works. They go in, sabotage from within, create chaos, and build something within the structure that's already there, be it religion, be it intelligence, be it a corporation. They take the structure, they go in within it like a virus, change it from within, and then it's something different from what you initially joined. So you could be working these places, gone in there with the best of intentions, and suddenly you start to see that the company that you got involved with maybe a few years before is no longer the company that you initially thought it was. That's happened by design. These structures are built up and then they're infiltrated and changed from within. Sabotaging and sabotage. Bacharach and Macari were both among prominent researchers in the so-called Norfolk Group, who published a report on the government's response to COVID-19 in 2022 that highlighted the damage caused by policies such as school closures, the delay approval of therapeutics, mRNA, vaccines, warp speed, and failings in data collection, and set out questions that should be asked by COVID-19 Commission. Of course they did, but then on the other side, you've got Trump pushing out warp speed, and he's still proud of it. He said recently that he's proud of the 5-year or 4-year anniversary of all of this madness. So they're playing the goodies whilst doing the baddie stuff and then swapping sides. It's quite clear Trump is massively responsible, and those who are around him, who are still his friends, they just pretend enemies now, for pushing the whole COVID scam. It happened and started under his watch, remember. So now he's kind of distancing himself in certain aspects, and they're saying that the likes of RFK Jr. And this fella here, who's attached to Peter Thiel or has a background with Peter Thiel, are going to come in and save the day when they're all together in on it. Call me a conspiracy theorist. But it's okay, because we've got a new pope. I think it's a bit of a surprise selection. Not many of us know much about this man. This will be something we're all looking into recently. But what we've been saying in the alternative media at the moment, those who are really looking into the stuff, that Christianity has been built back up. The West is being assigned by this cult the position of Rome, the Edomites, the West, which is supposed to fall, the biblical text. Not that I'm religious in any way, but you can see how they're playing this out as if it is an agenda. Was supposed to, Rome was to fall, to fall. That's the text. It says twice. So it's been built back up here to fall again. And we are being aligned in the West to fall here for this Sabbatean cult, in my opinion. So the new Pope's brother says he is middle of the road as it happened. Gone to his brother. This blog is now closed. Let's have a look. Robert Francis Prevost, the moderate, good-humoured first American Pope. There's a good-humoured in there. The other one was a Jesuit, by the way, the last one. Robert Francis Prevost, who had chosen the papal name Leo XIV. I'm not quite sure what that is. That may be 16. No, that wouldn't be 16, would it? You'd have to work that one out because it's backwards. May not be the Latin American Jesuit wildcard that his predecessor, Pope Francis, was, but his election is similarly historic. In the figure of the 69-year-old former head of the Augustine order, the Roman Catholic Church has its very first US leader. Very important there. His very first US leader. Now, Donald Trump, this wasn't his pick. It wasn't Trump's pick at all. He had a guy that was supposedly from New York. They're all from New York, the gangs of New York, the men in black. So this guy isn't that guy. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. But again, remember, this is part of building up the West as the Roman Empire to fall again in terms of the research that we're doing. Until Thursday evening, the idea of the fisherman's ring being slipped onto a North American hand was seen as a fairly distant possibility. The fisherman's ring. The Vatican's long-standing opposition to a US Pope stemmed largely from the optics of having a pontiff from a political superpower and a country with such a hegemonic cultural and secular global influence. But all that changed after a short conclave that chose a man who had been a cardinal for only a little more than 2 years. It'd be interesting to really dig back into his past and where he's come from. Only 2 years. He was a close friend of Pope Francis. While his appointment is likely to be welcomed by progressive factions within the church, whatever that means, it was probably not the news that some of the more conservative Trump-aligned US brothers cardinals have been hoping for. So this is a really interesting one, but it does set up that divide there. In terms of, let's have a look at who Trump really is, in terms of him being likely, possibly, in my opinion, a Sabbatean Frankist, clearly in line with everything that's going on with Israel and moving on this messianic agenda towards the end in the Middle East there. So what does he need? Maybe they do need in the background a kind of adversary in Rome. So he can be seen to be supporting him kind of on the surface, but in the background, they're all one and the same. It's twisted all of this up. So there's a lot of this friends, enemies things going on at the moment. People who are clearly friends still having these fallouts. This will be really interesting. Maybe, hopefully, there is someone in there that will stop all this. We don't know. We can't tell until we see things going forward. But Pope Francis is now gone, and Robert Francis Prevost is in place. So this will be really interesting to see how this works out, because on the surface here, it does look like he would go up against what the likes of Donald Trump would say. But being the first US Pope, we shall see, won't we? There's a lot more going on here as we twist and turn into this strange, strange land that we're in at the moment, with all of these pieces being moved around in terms of this messianic agenda, which is about fulfilling biblical prophecies, they call them, but an agenda, which is the third temple built, and which is their world to come, Olam Haba, New World Order, Golden Age, all the same thing, different terms, but the same thing. And Rome plays a huge part in it, but Rome's supposed to fall. When you look at what Washington, D.C. is now, Washington, D.C. was once called Rome, Maryland, and it's built on land that replicates the 7 hills of Rome, including Capitol Hill and Capitoline Hill. So this is clearly the Roman cult moved over to the US. Rome never really fell, it just went into the shadows. But now what you've got over there, you've got what was a Freemasonic, quite clearly a Roman cult built over there to replicate the Roman Empire over there that never really fell, went into the background. And now what you have is these Sabbateans have gone in there and infiltrated that and taken that down from within. And that links back to Israel and this messianic agenda that uses the West and Rome as the enemy to fall the Edomites. So it's really, really interesting to see how this will play out within that complex web of twisting narratives. But suffice to say, it may not end well for the West unless we wake up quite clearly and quickly. These people are not our friends. But who is this Pope? We shall see. Very interesting times, strange, strange times. These aren't prophecies. These are plans and agendas. None of this has to happen if we keep waking people up to it. So today's show has been brought to you in association with Iconic Coffee. Head over to shop.iconic.com and use the code TRENDING for 10% off. We will see you next week when maybe the Pope will reveal himself to be more of actually what he is. See you later. Have a good weekend. Take care.